Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read a part of Sir Richard Burton's book, First Steps in East Africa, Exploration of Harar, a book published in 1850s, where he mentions piles of rocks and them doing something to that piles of rocks. And this is a similar situation to the other video I did about the sycamore tree, where I say that I think many people reading this book will miss that detail, but it caught my attention because the sycamore tree is treated as very sacred in very many other societies, like among the Agikuyu, the Mugumo, and other communities in East Africa, and even ancient Egypt in the Indian subcontinent, and different other places, ancient civilization, modern societies. And each caught my attention because he mentioned the sycamore tree as a tree that was treated as very sacred by a certain group of people who were moved by the Somalis from the land. And this was land near Harar, actually. Now, in another part of the book, he mentions them walking towards two piles of rocks. They are called the Kayans, and they throw either more rocks or some coins to the pile. And that caught my attention. In fact, it's just a sentence or two sentences that way he mentions that. He mentions it as nothing special, but it caught my attention for a similar reason like why the sycamore tree caught my attention. And it's because I've done a video and I was reading, I think it was John Boy's book, The King of the Agikuyu. And in that book, he explains that among the Agikuyu, there was this habit of, you'll find piles of rocks on the way. And when you reach there, you'll pick a rock and throw it to the pile of rocks. And then you go your way. And he tried to ask the Agikuyu, and they will not tell him why they did that. But then, the same thing happens in Ethiopia, Abyssinia, then. And I read a different document that brought up that same point, but John Boyes himself also does bring it up that in Abyssinia, he saw a similar practice. But these were piles of rocks next to churches. And when you passed by, you'd throw a rock to that pile. And he asked the Abyssinians, and they told him it's because there is a church nearby. And by throwing a rock to the pile, you are basically worshipping in that church without having to go there. That's the explanation he was given. Now, when we come to Richard Burton's book, First Steps in East Africa, Exploration of Harar, of course, he's talking about his stay in the land of the Somali generally. Now, the Somali, of course, were, we can say 99 or maybe 100% Muslim. So their belief system is more, we can say maybe predictable. Even today, we can understand it, even though it's about 200 years that have gone by. But there are these details that leave you wondering, leave you confused a little bit, or at least it left me perplexed for a moment. And he talks about them walking towards these piles of rocks, and they throw something there, which I tried to Google what that word means, and I struggled a little bit. And here is the reason why. This book was published in 1850s, and often you run into words that are no longer in use, that is Old English, and you might struggle to get the meanings of those words. Some words we can, some words you really try to find the actual meaning and you struggle. I was trying to look for the exact meaning of this word he uses, and the closest I could get is small coins that were used mostly in the Middle East in the 19th century that were called mites. I'm going to read that part, and it says, about halfway up, they were going uphill, we passed two Kayans and added to them our might like good Somal. So they threw some things to these piles, like good Somals, meaning Somali people were expected to throw something to these rocks or these piles of rocks. And another part of this book, of course, it does talk about the different practices of the Somalis, at least two practices that involved rocks, especially when you take an oath, things like that, things to do with oath. There was a way that you'll use rocks for that. Now, this is a question to the people watching me. Maybe there is somebody there who understands or knows something about this. Was there something like people throwing either money or rocks to piles of rocks that they will find on the way? I'm going to put, or I've put the screenshot of that part. As I said, it's just a sentence, and I've not found anywhere in the book where it says something similar. So I would like to hear from people watching me whether they know something about piles of rocks and throwing either money or more rocks to it, and what did that signify among the Somalis. Of course, as I've said, John Boyes tried to ask what it meant among the Agikuyu, and he wasn't given a straight answer. The way he explains is like the Agikuyu were hiding it from him because it was their secret, and then the Abyssinians told him it's because there is a church nearby, and throwing a rock means you are worshipping in the church. Those are my random thoughts.